Spare a moment. Gaze lovingly at your phone screen right now. A few gentle taps, maybe a quick facial scan, and behold, those glorious numbers in your banking app pop up, bestowing upon you a strangely serene sense of security. Ah, the sweet fruits of endless toil, the unassailable shopping power we foolishly believe is ours to command, always ready to be unleashed. Fast forward to March 2026, where cashless payment tech has become as essential as breathing city air, and humanity seems trapped in a deep collective hallucination. These digital digits are the ultimate measure of wealth and clout. We stare at those dancing numbers, convinced they represent an unshakable purchasing might. According to the latest income growth stats, the average U.S. worker's salary in early 2026 has hit a respectable $5,000 a month. In normal macroeconomic times, that's enough to keep your grocery cart full, cover your bills, and play your part in the grand consumer merry-go-round. But lurking behind the glittering convenience of the digital economy is a far more brutal, pragmatic truth, folks. Money, my dear friends, has absolutely no inherent value. It's just a fancy piece of paper, a social IOU, that represents your right to demand energy and all its delicious derivatives. Every single item you consume daily, from your humble bunch of greens to that sleek smartphone glued to your palm, is, at its core, just energy crystallized into various physical forms. And for over a century, the lifeblood pumping energy into the entire circulatory system of human civilization has been, wait for it, oil. Now let's dip our toes into an extreme but very real nightmare that keeps global policymakers up at night, clutching their organic herbal tea: 90 days without oil. This isn't some sci-fi flick, it's a perfectly plausible scenario of a sudden, total breakdown of global supply chains, thanks to some complex geopolitical tango. What good will your shiny salary be when every production machine stops purring, every mighty cargo ship rusts at anchor, and the illusion of money crumbles, exposing the brutal, bare-bones survival limits of the working class? Welcome to the Essence Code, or as we like to call it, your reality check has arrived, where we peel back the layers of truth society desperately wants to keep hidden. To grasp why your paycheck is as fragile as a politician's promise in the face of an energy crisis, we first need to confront the sheer scale of the addiction deeply rooted in every facet of modern life. We often pat ourselves on the back for this glorious digital age, for our smart cities glowing with neon dreams, but here's a truth few want to admit. Modern human civilization isn't built on flimsy solar panels or those weather-dependent, whimsical wind turbines. Nope. All this prosperity, this entire towering edifice, is shaped and supported by the enormous, dense, and, so far, utterly irreplaceable energy punch of hydrocarbons. Oil is the lifeblood pumping through civilization's veins, and when that blood flow stops, the economic body immediately goes into a clinical coma. Here in UK, our lightning-fast industrialization and urbanization over the past decade have indeed churned out impressive GDP growth numbers. But guess what? It's also pushed our oil consumption to historic highs. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration and the Energy Institute, our beloved country guzzles down somewhere between 555,000 to over 602,000 barrels of oil every single day. This colossal figure has cemented Vietnam's spot as one of Southeast Asia's biggest and most energetic, pun intended, energy markets. Oil is everywhere, folks, from our transportation networks, heavy industry and mining, to the churning guts of petrochemical plants. However, tucked behind those impressive consumption figures lies a throbbing paradox, our very own Achilles heel in energy security. You might vaguely recall that Vietnam was quite the crude oil exporter back in the early 2000s, but reality, like a bad breakup, has gone completely the other way. Domestic extraction has entered a seriously steep natural decline. International energy stats show our local oil production now hovers around a modest 197,000 barrels per day, a rather meager amount, far, far less than what our thirsty economy actually needs. The inevitable consequence? We're utterly dependent on massive imports of crude oil to fill that ever-widening energy gap. To quench this fuel thirst, we rely on two vital hearts, the Amazon and the Tomi Petrochemical Refinery. In theory, their combined design capacity could meet about 70% of our domestic refined fuel needs. But here's the kicker most people gloss over. The raw material feeding these two giant factories is hugely dependent on imported crude oil, especially from the ever-unstable Middle East. While Samsung mixes domestic and imported crude, Tomi is a 100% committed fan of Kuwaiti oil. This dependency turns our energy security system into a high-stakes poker game, fraught with risk from any global geopolitical hiccup. If international crude supply gets cut off, these two colossal factories will quickly become useless hunks of metal within a mere few weeks of limping operation. Even more alarming, our emergency cushion against supply chain shocks is ridiculously thin. In the modern world, a nation's most critical line of defense is its strategic reserves. Yet, in USA, our actual fuel reserves currently hover around a paltry 30 to 60 days' worth of imports. While the government has wisely noticed this ticking bomb chain and ordered agencies to explore upping reserves to at least 90 days, building storage facilities and filling millions of barrels requires colossal capital and years, not months. So if our 90 days without oil scenario suddenly hits now, with reserves maxing out at 60 days, our economy will be completely energy-starved by the third month. And remember, chaos won't politely wait until day 60. It'll erupt within the first few weeks as panic takes over the market, making those paper reserves evaporate faster than your New Year's resolutions, thanks to public hoarding and speculation. This, my friends, is the brutal truth about the energy structure we rely on, a system that runs smoothly until it's critically vulnerable to the toxic winds of global geopolitics. For a 90-day oil drought to become a grim reality, the disruption doesn't need to simultaneously hit every single oil well or field worldwide. Thanks to the highly centralized nature of the extraction industry and international maritime trade, our world actually runs on fatal choke points, or geopolitical jugulars, if you will. Imagine the global economy as a colossal living body, and these choke points are the crucial arteries supplying oxygen. Just squeeze a few of these strategic spots, and the entire economic body will immediately suffer severe oxygen deprivation, leading to systemic paralysis. In the polarized world of 2026, the Strait of Hormuz is the grandest, most terrifying example of this concept. Tucked between Iran and Oman, this narrow waterway is considered the modern world's most critical jugular. Every single day, about 20 million barrels of oil flow through here, accounting for nearly 20% of global liquid fuel consumption. According to strategic maritime data, a whopping 38% of all global seaborne crude oil must pass through this narrow channel to reach its markets. Any military escalation, any mine blockade, or widespread maritime sanctions here could instantly paralyze humanity's energy flow. This isn't just some local hiccup, it's a black swan shock, potentially triggered by a collapse of international payment systems due to financial weaponization or a massive shipping embargo. However, if we only see the Strait of Hormuz through the lens of crude oil, we're missing half of the even scarier picture. And this, my friends, is where the real code of collapse is hidden. Oil isn't the only thing sailing through Hormuz. A statistic rarely noticed by the public, yet absolutely vital for the survival of billions, is the proportion of other strategic goods that would also get stuck if this jugular were tightened. Specifically, about 29% of the world's liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG, and 19% of liquefied natural gas, or LNG, depend on this route. This means a disruption here would instantly crash national power grids and cause fuel shortages in many countries. A disruption in this area wouldn't just create an energy price shock, it would immediately cripple the global fertilizer and chemical supply chains. The Middle East, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, and Iran, is home to the planet's largest fertilizer production centers and export ports. They control nearly 49% of global urea exports and about 30% of global ammonia exports. Iran, sitting right at the mouth of the strait, is itself the world's third largest ammonia producer, an indispensable ingredient for maintaining fertile soil and ensuring food security. When maritime traffic through these choke points grinds to a halt for 90 days, the most brutal consequence isn't just your personal car lacking gas to get to the office. A faraway geopolitical event in the Middle East could render your hard-earned monthly salary utterly powerless. But why? Because this energy disruption means rice paddies in the Mekong Delta won't get their urea fertilizer to grow, farms won't have animal feed, and the entire global food supply chain will wither into exhaustion. Energy and agriculture aren't separate industries, they are a unified system. Choking energy at international choke points is, in essence, choking humanity's stomach. In the post-globalization era, national security and the purchasing power of your salary are no longer solely within the grasp of domestic policies. They are tightly bound to the stability of these fragile maritime routes. Once the bloodline at Hormuz is severed, the illusion of fiat money's power will begin to crack as it loses the most critical physical foundation for sustaining life: energy and food. As the crisis's first weeks unfold and reserves rapidly deplete, the true impact of oil scarcity will deliver its most devastating blows to the logistics network, the very circulatory system of the entire economy. You must understand, oil isn't just fuel, it's the only bloodstream genuinely operating the entire global and domestic logistics industry. Every gigantic container ship traversing oceans, every heavy-duty truck hauling goods from rural areas to cities, and every express delivery plane you see daily, they all drink fossil fuels to sustain their existence. Once this blood flow stops, the entire movement of the world will freeze solid in an instant. Facing the prospect of oil depletion, a large portion of us, and even policymakers, often cling to a delusional savior: renewable energy and electric vehicles, EVs. A very common argument suggests that electrifying transportation and expanding the grid with clean energy can solve the energy crisis. Indeed, EVs offer superb advantages in grid management. With their large battery packs, millions of EVs could act as a giant decentralized energy storage system, stabilizing the grid by absorbing surplus power from wind and solar. In fact, the investment cost for renewable energy to power an entire national vehicle fleet for 50 years is calculated to be only equivalent to the cost of importing and refining crude oil for just 1 year. However, I must frankly tell you, that's a story of a transition spanning decades. Within the narrow, brutal timeframe of 90 days without oil, renewable energy and EVs are completely helpless in maintaining the survival supply chain. An EV might get you from one district to another, but it absolutely cannot power the heavy agricultural tractors plowing millions of hectares of land. EVs also cannot replace the tens of thousands of tons of marine fuel needed to run superships carrying grain across oceans. And most importantly, the network of diesel trucks moving fresh food into megacities every night cannot instantly switch to battery power overnight. This multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure overhaul cannot be completed in 90 days. It must be done before the crisis hits, not as an emergency fix when everything is already collapsing. To better understand human reactions in this context, we can look back at a costly lesson from 2007 through a real-world simulation game called World Without Oil. This large-scale simulation studied human behavior during the first 32 days of a global peak oil shock. The results showed that in a crisis, people tend to seek micro and sustainable solutions, like walking, cycling, and focusing on local food consumption. However, this study also pointed out a fatal risk called groupthink, where we react like a herd and underestimate the complexity of the macroeconomic system. You and everyone around you dusting off their bicycles for work might solve personal commuting problems, but it absolutely won't solve the issue of rapidly emptying supermarket shelves. In Vietnam, this scenario would become incredibly bleak when there's no oil to run refrigerated trucks, and the vast rice bowls and food supplies from the Mekong Delta simply can't reach the tens of millions of hungry mouths in Ho Chi Minh City. Just Imagine a delightful paradox. Veggies in Lam Dong throwing a glorious, smelly party of rot right in their fields, because, well, who needs trucks when you're busy starving? Meanwhile, city folks, bless their hungry hearts, are staging impromptu food performances with air. Transportation costs? Oh, they're not just high, they're now the Mount Everest of nope, absolutely not. The grand finale? A stagflation so epic it'll make history books blush, where groceries aren't just expensive, they're playing a permanent game of hide and seek.
No oil? Oh, darling, that's when the modern consumer society's favorite blindfold finally slips off. Turns out you weren't just burning oil for your commute, you were practically chugging it to stay alive. We all harbored this charming fantasy of food magically appearing from Mother Earth, sunshine, and a sprinkle of fairy dust. But industrial agriculture, it's less a natural cycle and more a giant greasy contraption designed to convert ancient fossil fuels into your daily caloric intake. Agricultural ecologists, those party poopers, revealed a truly scandalous secret. For every measly calorie of food you eat, our modern farming methods guzzle 10 fossil fuel calories. Talk about a raw deal. This colossal energy buffet, fondly known as embedded energy, is everywhere, like an overzealous relative at a family gathering. It fuels those monstrous plows and harvesters, the water pumps working overtime like they're paid by the gallon, and even the humble electricity keeping your industrial-sized fridge chilly or your food dried. Yep, all thanks to burning hydrocarbons, basically ancient dinosaur juice. The reason you haven't felt the energy price pinch at the grocery store, because oil, plucked from the Earth's belly, has been ridiculously cheap compared to the bang-for-your-buck energy it provides. This creates a delightful paradox. Despite food being an energy hog, the percentage of income spent on eating has shrunk for decades. Food became so plentiful and cheap that waste graduated to societal norm. Bravo! But this economic magic trick only works if the oil tap keeps flowing. If that denominator hits zero for 90 days, poof, the whole system flips faster than a pancake on a griddle, sending food production costs soaring way past your monthly paycheck. Your salary, bless its heart, will suddenly feel very, very inadequate. The ultimate life-or-death secret handshake between fossil fuels and human survival is a rather dull-sounding industrial process called Haber-Bosch. Early 20th century, humanity took a rather dramatic detour when Fritz Haber and Carl Bosch figured out how to turn limitless atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia with extreme pressure and heat. To pull off this great and terrifying chemical party trick, they needed tons of hydrogen. And guess what's the cheapest, most abundant source? Ta-da! Natural gas and oil. This invention basically told Mother Nature to hold my beer and shattered all her growth limits. Imagine if we relied solely on Grandma's compost and sawdust, Earth could only feed a paltry 3 to 4 billion souls. But thanks to our synthetic, oil-based nitrogen fertilizers, crop yields went absolutely bonkers. Scientists confidently state these chemical concoctions are currently feeding half the world's population. Vaclav Smil, the expert of doom, calculates that without this magical fertilizer, global grain output would instantly plummet by half, condemning billions to immediate starvation. So much for organic aspirations. Thus, a little shipping hiccup in geopolitical hotspots like the Strait of Hormuz becomes a double whammy of destruction for your dinner table. Not only does it cut off crude oil, paralyzing farm machinery, cue dramatic slow-motion tractor death, but more importantly, it strangles the colossal fertilizer factories in the Middle East. Countries dependent on imports then face the rather unpleasant fate of agricultural impotence. Farmers, who already juggle rising input costs, will be utterly bewildered, staring blankly at empty fertilizer shelves for their next crop, wondering if pixie dust will work instead. In charming middle-income nations like Vietnam, this little disruption, combined with an energy blackout, will unleash widespread food shortages, practically inviting the ghost of famine back for an encore, a guest we thought was long gone. That's when you'll grasp a truly duh moment. Fiat money, whether those pretty papers in your wallet or the shimmering digits in your bank account, are absolutely useless at growing rice. Shocking, right? When grain reserves dry up faster than a desert river and new crops can't even sprout without fertilizer and can't be harvested without machines, food prices won't bother with boring inflation indices. Oh no, they'll be valued in the much more exciting currency of blood and raw survival instinct. Good luck with your budgeting then. Humanity's dazzling prosperity over the last century turns out it wasn't really thanks to our brilliant economic models, but more like stumbling upon a ridiculously concentrated treasure chest of fossil fuels and cleverly converting them into daily calories for our bellies. Who knew being a fossil fuel junkie was the secret to success? To truly understand how much oomph your money still has, you and I must bravely delve into the utterly brutal mechanics of crisis-era inflation. Now, don't confuse this with your garden variety inflation, the kind central banks whip up by printing money like it's going out of style. Oh no, this supply shock-induced inflation is a far more savage, widespread, and utterly uncontrollable beast. It's the Godzilla of economic woes. When the energy lifeline is abruptly severed, production and transport costs for everything in your CPI shopping basket will go absolutely bananas, multiplying faster than rabbits in spring. Inflation, at this point, isn't just a concept, it's a super-efficient, invisible tax that gleefully munches away at your purchasing power and utterly demolishes your real income. Poof, there goes your hard-earned cash. In this economic roller coaster, economists have a cute little term, sticky wages. Imagine your monthly salary, even if it got a fancy bump for 2026, is actually just a nominal number moving at the pace of a sloth on tranquilizers. Labor contracts, those stubborn things, are typically annual, taking eons to adjust. Meanwhile, black market prices for essentials are doing the Macarena, changing hourly, sometimes even by the minute. Talk about a disconnect. This real income erosion is the biggest, most agonizing bill for the salaried worker, who, lacking fancy defensive assets like real estate or foreign currency, gets to be the frontline victim. They're basically playing economic dodgeball without a helmet. Human economic history is practically a blooper reel of fiat currency collapses whenever a nation loses its core energy supply or production mojo. Remember the 1973 oil shock? OPEC's embargo sent shockwaves that literally reshaped the world order.
In the US, it kicked off the Great Inflation, a decade-long saga where rising price expectations burrowed into everyone's brains, leading to an endless price-wage spiral that mercilessly gnawed at the mighty dollar's purchasing power. Good times. Even a powerhouse like Japan once faced the terrifying prospect of a world devoid of oil tankers, forcing them into an emergency energy makeover just to survive. Talk about a glow-up under duress. But things get really spicy when inflation goes full Godzilla and morphs into hyperinflation, where even your own grandma wouldn't take your currency in its homeland. Venezuela's tale is a classic Dutch hen sob story. Too much oil export, not enough anything else. When their oil industry went belly up thanks to questionable management and global drama, hyperinflation exploded, vaporizing everyone's purchasing power and conjuring up extreme scarcity of food and medicine. Money depreciated so fast, people literally tossed banknotes onto the streets because they weren't even worth the paper they were printed on. Talk about a trashy situation.
Or take Zimbabwe in 2008. The world watched in awe as hyperinflation hit a mind-boggling 500 billion%, forcing the government to ditch its own currency and revert to the charming old system of, I'll trade you a chicken for that fancy watch, or, just using foreign money. Beyond the currency's dramatic meltdown, another delightful danger lurking in deep trust crises is the total collapse of commercial banks, courtesy of the good old bank run. When folks fear their money is about to become worthless confetti, their primal instinct kicks in. Rush to pull out every last penny, hoping to transmute it into gold, foreign currency, or just anything hoardable, like toilet paper, but more valuable. To prevent the financial system from completely face-planting, state regulators will have to whip out emergency intervention policies. Deposit insurance limits might get a reassuring bump, cue collective sigh of relief. But simultaneously, governments will surely impose strict limits on how much cash you can withdraw daily. This, my friend, is the cruelest joke of all. Your money is still there, beautifully displayed as numbers in your bank account, but you can't actually get it out to buy survival when you need it most. It's like having a winning lottery ticket, but being unable to cash it. When the dreaded 90 days without oil finally hit, production lines will grind to a halt, foreign exchange reserves will vanish like a magic trick gone wrong, and your fiat currency's value will utterly collapse because, well, it no longer represents anything real. In this delightful stagflationary hyperinflation scenario, your monthly income will truly just be meaningless numbers on a system that's having a very public breakdown. Understanding this isn't meant to plunge us into despair, but rather to properly identify the beast so we can prepare our minds and assets before the hyperinflation ghosts come knocking on every family's door. Consider it a pre-apocalypse pep talk.
To truly grasp the purchasing power meltdown, forget complex charts. Just gaze lovingly at your dinner plate and wallet as the crisis unfolds. To quantify this collapse, we're assuming price fluctuations and the graceful disappearance of goods based on those fun, hyperinflationary supply chain models. This scenario humorously simulates the rapid decline in purchasing power of your average March 2026 salary, assuming no government intervention like, say, emergency ramen stamp distributions. Phase 1, Days 1 to 15, kicks off with a maximum psychological shock and a delightful explosion of scarcity speculation. The moment news confirms global oil supplies are taking a 3-month vacation, society's first reaction isn't actual physical shortages, but a spectacular eruption of extreme fear. A panic-buying tsunami will sweep through every nook and cranny, from gas stations to supermarkets to traditional markets. The urge to hoard essentials will multiply tenfold, far exceeding normal supply, instantly creating an "oops, we made it scarce" situation. History class from the UK fuel crisis in 2000 taught us that even top supermarkets can run out of food faster than you can say empty shelves if the distribution chain gets a tiny kink. Your salary, still sitting pretty in your account, but its real value is now performing an hourly disappearing act. Ta-da! Heads up, if you don't withdraw cash and shop within the first 48 hours, your free market purchasing power might just vanish by half. The slowpokes, they'll be buying essentials from opportunistic speculators at prices so outrageous, a kilo of meat or a box of instant noodles could suddenly cost 3 to 4 times its normal price. And while the market management police will be working 24/7, bless their hearts, trying to stop hoarding and absurd price hikes, the underground black market will be having a party, breaking all legal price control limits with glee. Entering Phase 2, days 16 to 45, the supply chain will perform a full body paralysis, catapulting the economy into runaway inflation. Commercial stockpiles will dwindle, and physical goods will simply refuse to travel from producer to consumer. Inflation won't be some mere psychological trick anymore. It'll be a bona fide absolute supply shortage. So while your veggies are having a grand rotting party in the suburbs, no trucks, the inner city will start feeling the hunger pangs. Your family dinner? It'll become a rather grim survival pop quiz. Regular rice, usually a modest 20,000 VND a kilo, could skyrocket on the black market to a cool 100,000 or even 200,000 VND per kilogram. Pork? It'll be rarer than a unicorn and priced beyond the wildest dreams of most workers. Enjoy your luxurious air sandwich. That monthly income of yours, if you're lucky enough to still get paid, will now barely cover survival meals for a small family for precisely 1 week. And those digital numbers in your banking app, they'll become slower and more elusive than ever as the banking system begins its grand collapse, leaving transactions perpetually pending.
The grand finale, days 46 to 90, will witness the absolute evaporation of faith in fiat money and the triumphant return of the direct barter economy. Initial panic will have morphed into quiet, existential despair. People will finally grasp that bank account numbers or stacks of paper money are surprisingly inedible. This is the flight from currency phenomenon, where everyone scrambles to offload their worthless cash for anything with real value. Farmers, who now hold the keys to the food kingdom, will politely but firmly decline your worthless banknotes or bank transfers. Instead, a charming direct exchange system will reign supreme. You'll trot your monthly salary out to the countryside, and the farmer will likely give you a polite but firm smile and a no thanks. They'll demand a warm jacket, a box of antibiotics, or even a mini solar panel kit just for 1 bag of rice. The pricing system will have completely imploded, and fiat currency will officially lose its job as both a measure of value and a means of payment. Awkward. And just like that, at the end of this fateful 90-day cycle, the income figure on your employment contract officially returns to its true zero utility value. It's no longer a handy tool for keeping you alive or ensuring your fabulous future. This collapse unveils a rather grim truth. The power of money, it turns out, was far more fragile than we ever imagined, much like a diet during a holiday season.
Our cherished trust in the system? Turns out it's just a flimsy mirage, hanging on by a thread of oil, naturally, as long as the black gold keeps gushing through the global economy's veins. All those digital zeros you diligently accumulated, poof, gone, replaced by the grim, unyielding laws of actual stuff and energy. When the free market decides to take a permanent vacation under the crushing weight of hyperinflation and nope, not a single one left scarcity, a survival economy is forced to rise like a slightly charred phoenix from the ashes of fiat currency transactions. The government will be like, emergency decrees, everyone, and slap on a rationing system faster than you can say, where's my avocado toast, just to keep us from devolving into a literal food fight. Yes, get ready for the grand comeback of ration cards, but this time it's like a supersized, high-definition, utterly terrifying version of history. Every last drop of national energy and every crumb of food, no matter how pathetic, will be instantly nationalized or put under military lockdown.
This spiffy new ration system, either a fancy digital code on your national ID or just good old physical tickets, will ensure you get your daily allowance of a whopping 1,500 to 2,000 calories, just enough to not quite die, and the bare minimum of essentials. But here's the kicker. Managing this logistical nightmare for nearly 100 million people, most of whom live in cities, is a bit of a pickle. Unlike ye olden days with fewer folks, today's gleaming megacities are actually just giant hungry consumption machines, utterly useless at, producing food. So divvying up an already pathetic pile of resources among a massive population, all of whom are hilariously dependent on industrial-scale supply chains, will become the ultimate national security brain teaser. The deepest, most obvious side effect of the global energy supply chain going poof is the total and utter reversal of globalization. Countries, provinces, and even little old villages will be forced back into a charming fend-for-yourself mode just to stay alive. In this delightful scenario, a truly painful, backwards Great Migration will kick off. The countryside, with its quaint little patches of dirt and actual water, will suddenly become the hottest and safest real estate in the energy hurricane. Meanwhile, those magnificent urban centers, food shortages and widespread power outages, because oops, no fuel for power plants, will transform those shiny skyscrapers into glamorous yet utterly unlivable concrete prisons. Those high-rise condos, once symbols of modern living, will become death traps when the elevators, clean water, and ventilation systems decide to take a permanent break. And here's where it gets truly dramatic. A cruel class reversal will unfold right before your very hungry eyes. Farmers, those folks with quaint, traditional farming skills who know how to grow things without fancy chemicals or tractors, possessing heirloom seeds and controlling water sources, will become the new elite, wielding actual economic power. They're the calorie controllers, the only truly valuable asset when all your financial apps stop working. Meanwhile, millions of office workers, programmers, and marketing gurus who once raked in millions of fiat currency but couldn't grow a single survival calorie will suddenly become the most tragically vulnerable class in this brave new world. Your fancy job title and degree? Poof, worthless against the primal growling demands of an empty stomach. Despite the government's best efforts and lots of angry decrees, a massive black market will explode like a supernova because, well, survival. On this shadowy trading floor, your fiat currency will be rejected faster than a bad Tinder date because it no longer represents anything real. Instead, truly valuable currencies will reign supreme: physical gold, silver, and precious jewelry to store value, life-saving medicines like broad-spectrum antibiotics, painkillers, and disinfectants, long shelf-life canned foods, hooray for Spam, non-GMO seeds, organic fertilizers, and water filtration gadgets. Even hidden fuel stashes and small-scale energy generators will become more coveted than any stack of crisp banknotes. Your purchasing power won't be dictated by your salary on a contract or your former corporate title. Oh no, it'll be decided by your actual survival skills, your shady underground network with local suppliers, and, most importantly, the pile of hard assets you smartly stockpiled before the whole thing went kaboom. This survival distribution order is a harsh reality, where power isn't about how many zeros are in your bank account, but how many actual things you own that can keep you alive in a world without oil. Having peeked into the grim details of a 90-day oil-free world, we realize this isn't just a hypothetical energy shortage exercise. It's a brutal reality check, ripping away the flimsy curtain from our modern civilization's delusions. The prosperity humanity enjoyed for the last century didn't magically appear from brilliant financial models or the ingenuity of paper money. It actually stemmed from us stumbling upon and greedily exploiting an unparalleled treasure trove of cheap, dense fossil energy. Money, when you strip away the glamour, is simply oil's shadow. Our proud civilization is precariously balanced on a thin tightrope stretched across an abyss. And that rope isn't woven with gold or USD. It's spun from precious drops of black gold.
When faced with the question, what will your salary buy you in those fateful 90 days? The most brutally honest answer is panic and starvation. If you continue to snooze in the delusion of fiat currency and utterly rely on global supply chains, your hard-earned monthly income will rapidly lose all ability to store value as hyperinflation explodes, turning those pretty paper bills back into their true physical worth, fancy scraps of paper. So here's the most practical advice right now. Stop hoping the current system will last forever. Real survival in this wildly unstable 21st century demands a multi-layered ecosystem. True energy independence, maybe learn to whittle, self-sufficiency in food supply, hello, balcony garden, and a strategic reserve deep enough to make a doomsday prepper blush. Your income is only truly valuable if you swiftly convert some of those digital numbers into assets with inherent survival value, hard assets, before the very last drop of oil splutters out.
Understanding and preparing for the snapping of that energy tightrope isn't being a Debbie Downer or a conspiracy theorist. It's the ultimate survival cheat code for those with macro vision and a real grasp of true world power. Don't let yourself be left behind when the illusion finally melts away. Act now to protect your future and your families starting today. If you found this information valuable and slightly terrifying, share it with your loved ones, hit like, and subscribe to the channel so we can decode even more hidden truths together. See you on Dr. Trump's next foresight journey as we delve into the mid and late stages of the 90-day cycle.